DC does it again, beating Marvel at their own game. Well, it's not really Marvel's game, but it is DC's game, and of course, I love them for it. What we're talking about, of course, if you checked by the title of this, of course, we are talking about The Death of Superman, the animated movie that just came out, like literally was digitally released July 24th, 2018. Now, I might have seen it a little bit ahead of time. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, I mean, Marvel doesn't. So this is the 32nd DC animated film and the 11th within the proper DC animated universe, which those are kind of two separate things. But in any case, you know, Marvel does animated movies, and of course they do their live action universe. But once again, DC's animated universe, especially the movies within this now 11-part canon, it blows away anything that Marvel does. Doesn't matter if it's live action, doesn't matter if it's animated, whatever the fuck Marvel does. Like every single time one of these movies, one of these DC animated movies comes out, it just smokes anything that Marvel even tries. And I'm not saying, I mean, yes, like, am I a little more partial to DC than I am Marvel? You better believe I am. Okay. And you didn't expect me to say anything less, right? Because every time one of these come out, so we review every single one of these on Patreon. Like anytime a DC animated movie comes out, we review it. I'm not afraid to review, Marvel animated movies either, but they're not so much an event as these are, okay? But regardless, you know, every time I've reviewed one of these, and I've reviewed most of them on Patreon, every time I review them, I mean, they're always great. Like, this is the beauty. That's why I can't wait to watch them. Like, whenever one of these comes out, you know, be it The Killing Joke, be it, you know, Batman Ninja, you know, whatever it ends up being, I'm just always so ecstatic to finally watch it because I can walk into it pretty much with the guarantee this is going to be fucking awesome. And Death of Superman did not disappoint whatsoever. We'll start talking about that in just a second. So if you're wondering about my audio, I'm actually not using my H6. I'm using the microphone on my, now I can't think of wait, where's the model? No, it doesn't even say the model on there. It just says 1080p HD. I'm using my Logitech webcam that I keep around. It's a tougher model. It's not like the C290 or whatever, the one that's really popular. It's kind of the one under that can fold up and, you know, is really pocketable. It's very nice. Anyway, I'm using that. I love the audio from it. In fact, I've done entire Sovereign Tech Prime episodes with it because I think the audio sounds that solid. And it has pretty good reach. Or pretty good range, I should say. So if you're wondering about the audio, why doesn't the Golden Stallion's voice sound just as melodious as it usually does inside of the BDSM studios? That's why. But don't worry, we got great content to get into here. Like I said, these are Patreon-only reviews that I do of all of these movies. I used to do them on Sovereign Tech Prime, so some of the early ones would have been, say, during the climax, or what used to be Pick of the Week, I think, is what I originally called it for, I don't know, like 100 episodes, or like 70 episodes back in the day. And anyway, I used to do a lot of them there, but then, you know, it's become something that people expect, and they love when I do the reviews of these movies. Like I said, you're pretty much guaranteed that they're going to be glowing. I think there was one where it wasn't glowing, but it was meant to be a lead-in to kind of a web series that was more around the CW universe and not around the DC animated universe proper. So that was the only one that I ever gave like a really bad review. But this, again, Death of Superman was not the case. Now, understand, Death of Superman is based upon the classic, and I do mean classic. Like, that word can get tossed around quite a bit. But this is one of the times where it lives up to everything we're talking about here. The classic 1992 to 93, this ran for a good long while, comic book storyline of death. Well, it ended up being Death and Return of Superman. It was actually, or Superman. It was a 3-part kind of saga. There was the Death of Superman, then there was Reign of the Supermen, and then there was Return of Superman. This would end up getting novelized in a fantastic, an amazing novelization. One of the best ways to experience a story outside of this film is the actual novel Death and Return of Superman. Of course, again, I can't tell you how big this story was. I mean, you had, the writers of it were phenomenal. I mean, you had Dan Jurgens, Roger Stern, Louise Simonson. I mean, this you had the cream of the crop writing this multi-issue storyline where Superman encounters Doomsday. But it was a huge deal back in '92, and they made a Super Nintendo game. In fact, it's one of the best Super Nintendo games ever made, in my opinion. Death and Return of Superman. And if you want to get an original edition of it, not one of like the remade flash carts, even though looks and plays just like an original version of it. But if you want to get an original version of it, that can often sell for a few $100. But definitely, did Capcom? I think Capcom made it, and it plays very much like what was that, Demon Crest? It plays a lot like that. I mean, it's just a brilliant video game. But again, that's how big a deal this was. And of course, originally there was going to even be a movie, full live action movie about it that was going to star Nicolas Cage. Among other attempts at it with this film. And this is not the first time that this story has been put into animated form. It was also done for the 2007 direct-to-video release, not part of the like canon DC animated universe, but a DC animated film called Superman Doomsday, which was about 75 minutes in runtime. And it was good, but they tried to squeeze in like the entire saga of they were trying to squeeze in death, reign, and return of Superman with Superman Doomsday. It wasn't just concentrating on one segment of the story. As to where Death of Superman, which just came out again, officially released July 24th, 2018. It did have an airing at the San Diego Comic-Con. This originally came out this is just concentrating on that one segment, on Death of Superman. Then, now in 2019, they've already said that they're going to do Reign of Superman, or Reign of the Supermen. And, just spoiler alerts, folks, spoiler alerts. You're going to get at the end of this, during the credits, make sure you watch the credits with this. I'll let you know that right out of the gate, because, well, if you don't know the storyline and why there's something called Reign of the Supermen, is because, well, obviously the title of this movie tells you what happens. Superman dies, and he does literally die. Okay, then you end up out of that, and this movie does a great job of leading up to it and explaining some of it. You're going to end up with 4 Supermen. Okay, 4 Supermans, but Supermen. So that's why you call it Reign of the Supermen. You'll end up with that, and it does a great job of leading up to that, but that's what you're going to get in the 2019 film. And during the credits, you get like 4 end credit sequences showing off each of these Supermen. For those that, again, look, this storyline's, 25, however many years old, okay? I don't think it can exactly get spoiled for you. You can just enjoy experiencing it in motion with this. But you end up getting... you'll see Hank Henshaw, of course, the cyborg Superman. You'll end up seeing Kal-El, which is Superboy, which is kind of the clone of Superman. You end up seeing Steel, right, was that John Irons or whatever. And you get the Eradicator. You get an interesting introduction to the Eradicator, who will end up being the 4 Supermen. Of course, the storyline with Reign of the Supermen is that each one's trying to claim that they're actually Superman when really none of them are. But you'll find out about that when in 2019, Reign of the Superman comes out. I can't imagine why they wouldn't make this. I'm sure they're already well into production because I think this one's going to be a hit. I think this is going to be a very big deal. And most of the reviews I've read have been very, very kind to this with little complaints. As to where some of like Killing Joke and some of the other DC animated universe movies that have come out as late, there seems to be like some concerns of some kind of sexism or something like this within. And I'm not saying those aren't real things. I'm just saying I disagree with what they attribute in some of these DC animated movies, especially when they never complain about it in the Marvel films, when the Marvel films may be loaded with the things, like they're just not as critical. Now, maybe that means that IO9 and these other, journalistic institutions are on the take of Disney. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that was the case. And so they just constantly rip on DC. Because again, like I said, these movies are always just infinitely better than anything. I mean, look, I like Black Panther fine. This is 10 times the film that Black Panther is. I can dig Avengers movies. I can dig Iron Man. I can dig Ant-Man. I can dig all that. This blows them all out of the water. And it's one of the greatest, storylines in history. To talk a little bit about that before we get more into the movie. When this came out, this made really big news. Like, this was serious headlines. And I remember, I was 11 years old. I cried. When I found out, I didn't even read the comic book. When I just read it in the newspaper, my grandmother gave it to, she cut it out of the newspaper. She handed it to me in the newspaper and said, it's like, wow, look at this, Brian. What's going on here? And I read it, and I remember walking up the street and just falling to tears, because it's like, whoa, Superman dies? Now, funny thing is, as much as I can feel that, okay, or as I felt that, the funny thing is that me being 11 years old and not having the knowledge of comic book history that I do now, I didn't realize that Superman had died many times, just like 10 years before, in the 10 years previous to that, Superman had died like almost once a year, like literally died, and would just come back, often within the same issue or within a couple issues maybe. But it was never a big deal. But Superman kept dying. And in fact, I remember like the first time that I heard about that was actually from Harlan Ellison. In fact, I think he even has a video about it where he talks about it when it happened. He says, why is this such a... And Harlan Ellison's a huge comic book fan, but really, he was a great defender of comic books as a legitimate, entertainment, reading, and art medium. But I remember he did a video about it where he says, what's the big deal, everybody? He's like, and he went down the list of which issues had happened, and he broke it all down saying, look, Superman's died a ton of times. Like, actually died. It wasn't like he faked it. He actually died. And, and why was this such a big deal? Well, it was a big deal because it was a really well done story. It was very well written. This is I think, in my mind, if I were to think of the top 3 comic book stories of all time, and I know people are going to disagree, are going to argue about some of these, because somebody's going to want to toss in Watchmen, somebody's going to want to toss in Crisis on Infinite Earths or something like that. I would say probably the 3 biggest stories in comic book history, this is probably number 1. Number 2, I would give to Nightfall, which is when Batman doesn't die, but he effectively, has to hand over the cowl, right? Because Bane breaks his back and everything. And then probably Age of Apocalypse with X-Men, Age of Apocalypse. So Marvel's in there. Marvel did great shit, but their greatest shit has always been with the X-Men, in my opinion, every single time. But yeah, those would probably be the top 3. So we're talking about, in my opinion, and certainly as far as like newsworthiness, this was, the marketing machine behind it, whatever it was, whatever reason that every newspaper in the world wanted to write about this compared to writing about any other real... Well, maybe when Jason Todd died in Batman, Death in the Family, when Joker killed Jason Todd, which was the second Robin. I remember that got some interesting news, and that was about 5 years or so before this. But otherwise, that stuff never got talked about. And why this got talked about so much? Well, maybe there was a marketing machine behind it, and DC was paying off newspapers, to give them some press. I don't know, but it worked. It was huge. It was a big deal. Again, obviously they made video games about it. There really aren't that many comic book storylines that get entire video games about them outside of perhaps the X-Men, right? This was that huge. Now, to talk about, before we get into the film, okay, again, we set the stage. The big deal here, make sure you stick around for the credits. Does anybody else do that? Does anybody else, when they go to the movie theater, do they ask, like, hey, is there an end credit sequence? Should I see this? I do that all the time. I think you're kind of crazy if you don't. But if you don't, well, now maybe you're not crazy. You just didn't know to do it. Well, now you know to do it. You should do it. But I'm letting you know right out that, yeah, there's going to be a sequel to this, and that you want to catch what happens during the end credits. And the little scenes are cute, especially if you know the story. The scenes are well done. They're fast. But they are very, very, very well done. So how did I see this? Talking about movie theaters. So I went to theaters to go see this. Just kidding. No, I did not. I actually watched this in VR. Woo! I put on my Oculus Go. I side-loaded the movie onto my virtual reality headset, the Oculus Go. And again, the movie runs about an hour and 20. And I actually have my Project Rock headphones, which are these very, very high-end, very nice headphones. I pop those on and, plug them into the nice thing about the Project Rock headphones is, in fact, I have to do a review of those for Patreon. Maybe I'll do that soon. But anyway, they have, the nice thing is that they're Bluetooth. Those headphones are both Bluetooth, and they have, you can plug in a 1/8 cord to it, and that way you can plug it in anything with the 1/8 jack, which is really handy for when I want to connect it to the Oculus Go. Even though the Oculus Go's built-in speakers are creepily good, like creepily good. But everybody's going to hear what you're doing so you don't want to watch porn with it, right? But or not without a pair of headphones. But anyway, the Project Rock headphones always handy for plugging into my Oculus Go when I'm on the go. Of course, they're great for when I'm at the gym, which is their main purpose. They're awesome when I need to plug in headphones to the 3DS to get that full, rich sound that the Nintendo 3DS offers. So that was my setup. Is I laid back, and I did. I laid back. I used Skybox VR, which is that was the app that I used to watch the movie. And I watched it right in a movie theater, or what very much appeared like a movie theater. It was amazing. I even stood up for a second, turned around to look at the projector behind me. The whole thing, it was really, really wild. I talked about Skybox VR. I think I was asked to review it. I think I talked about it on a hangout, on a live hangout. And somebody asked me what I thought of it. And it's my go-to app now for watching anything, on the Oculus Go, on my VR headset. Unless it's like content on Netflix, like I'll watch Voltron or Godzilla 2 or whatever on Netflix. But if it's something that my independent copy, I absolutely use Skybox VR every single time. I know there's other ones, there's other apps, but Skybox just does it, and it's free. And even if when it comes out of beta, because it is in beta, when it comes out of beta, if they charge $5 or $10 for it, hell, I'd pay $20 for that app. I think it's that damn good. So I really, that provided a really, really cool experience. And it's amazing to consider, right? Before we're even talking about the movie, it's amazing to consider that I can carry around, because I have a hard case for my, for my Oculus Go headset. Okay. And that case, everything can sit inside of it. The Oculus Go controller, the Oculus Go, a little cloth and everything. And then, of course, a plug for it, a power adapter. And the amazing thing is that, when you consider the size, because again, you don't have to plug in a phone or anything, and you always have your phone with you anyway that it connects to, but it can work independently without the phone. You just can't install new software without the phone. That's all. It's amazing to consider that you are literally carrying around a full-on movie theater with you. And I mean that. Especially if you put on a great pair of headphones, you are carrying around, in a very small package, a full-on movie theater. And it is an amazing experience, and that is in many ways life-changing, and sort of what I've always wanted since the 90s, really since the original comic book of Death of Superman came out, is what I've always wanted was, okay, no, just give me that experience where like I can put myself in the theater and I can watch a movie at any given moment. I mean, and look, these DC animated movies, especially as late, some of them have been so huge where they do get full theatrical releases in certain markets, like in New York City or Boston or, LA or wherever, okay? I don't even need to do that. I mean, sure, like I'm not going to, unfortunately, I can't really interact with other fans or anything like that. But honestly, the past few times that I've gone to movies, I haven't, whoever's with me, I interact with them, but otherwise I don't talk to people there anyway, because I don't know, nerds are different these days. And I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing, but regardless, it is amazing to carry around a literal movie theater with you wherever you happen to go. As long as you can fit that headset somewhere, away you go. And again, this movie was only 1 hour and 20. The Oculus Go has a 2.5 hour battery life. And it was, so it played well within the battery life that I had. Of course, I could have just left it plugged in. Like I always carry around with me a USB 2.0 extension cord, that goes like 12 feet or something. So if I had to plug it into a wall and then, have it going, I could have done that in case I ever wanted to watch, I don't know, one of the extended versions of Lord of the Rings or some shit. But it's awesome. And again, I did totally lose myself in the idea that I was just like sitting in the theater and enjoying this movie in the theater, and it felt right. I mean, you can say, well, yeah, you can always just watch a movie on your smartphone, or you could always just watch the movie on your tablet, or you could always just watch the movie on your laptop or something like that. Sure, I understand. I get that. And I do that, and I've done that, and it generally does beautifully. But something that is unique about this, first off, is that your laptop is, I mean, yeah, you could carry around like a Pico projector or something, right? That'll, I don't know, do a 120-inch screen. on some wall, but you'd have to have an empty wall to do that for one, okay? Uh, this, again, having that massive, and you can change the size of the screen, having that massive screen at any given moment is pretty fucking awesome. And you have it without, it doesn't disrupt anybody. It doesn't bother anybody else. You just pop on the headset and away you go and you do your thing. The other really nice thing about having the headset is that unlike when you're watching something, even on your smartphone, this happens, and you'd think it wouldn't with so little screen real estate. But like when you watch something on your laptop or whatever, you're often kind of multitasking as to where, and there's as many times where I wish, because you are in this simulated environment, right? When you put on a VR headset, as much as I wish that there, like I could get some kind of notifications, in case like Stephanie's messaging me or something like that. Like that would be really nice. Okay. Like if I could have that, but then also on the flip side of that, it's very nice to sort of be forced to watch a movie it's just like when you actually go to the theater in a very real way, unless you're one of those people that pulls out your smartphone while you're watching a movie in the movie theater. In a very real way, it forces you to actually consume the content, consume the media. Okay, so it forces you to actually watch the movie and you kind of get lost in it. And that's something that's been, I'll admit, missing for me. Like, I don't always just sit there and watch something. It's one of the joys of watching a lot of anime and things like that, is that, especially if you have to watch it with Japanese and English subtitles, is that you're sort of forced to watch it. I mean, even me, who I know a little bit of Japanese, I've got to read the translations to really make sense of everything most of the time. And so, watching anime kind of forces you to watch anime. And I think for a few years now, it's why watching anime has been a much more visceral experience for me. But there is an advantage to being in the simulated reality, not getting notifications within that reality. And, if you want to consume the movie as it's there, you've got to stick in it. You know what I mean? You can't because like even if you're watching on your smartphone with VLC player, on an Android phone or something, you still get notifications. You can still just tap the screen and the notifications come up. As to where in VR, that, or with the Oculus VR anyway, that doesn't happen. So there's a real advantage to that, and it allowed me to really take in the movie much more than perhaps I normally would. So I enjoyed that. Watching this in VR, there's as much to talk about with that as there is anything else. And I mean, I've been consuming a lot of media this way recently because, again, it is so nice. I mean, it's not like Stephanie and I don't have a TV. We've got, I don't know, whatever it is, a 32 or some stupid number inch TV. And it's a 720p TV? Yes. Yeah, I think it's a 720p TV. As to where, and this is important to understand too, every VR headset that you experience today does not do 1080p video. Like it does not, if you're watching a movie in 1080p, you are just wasting lines. You're wasting processing power because it can only display 720p. That's a fact of life right now with every single VR headset out there. You cannot consume this stuff in 1080p. So anyway, I mean, the resolution's more or less the same, and that that I would get on the TV and everything. I mean, but it's not like we don't have a TV. It really is something special to watch it in VR for a bunch of reasons. The tech aspect of it, the futuristic aspect of it, and then even not just the futuristic, but almost the nostalgic and the lost in the moment aspect of watching it in VR it's really, really something. So, all right, let's get down to the movie, shall we? This movie, I mean, there's little things that it did that updated it from the original 92 comic book, but they're all updates that made it work and just sort of brought it into the modern world, right? Like there's cell phones in it, things like this. Maybe the biggest change, I think, from the 92 comic is that, so in this movie, again, we're just loaded with spoiler alerts here, folks, even though it's an old story. Lois doesn't. So in the comics, Lois had known for years that Clark was Superman. That was not like that. That had just been part of the program. As to where in this movie, and I appreciate how they did it. It gives you a nice love story that ends with what you could call heroic sacrifice, because of course, the character of Doomsday, that being the major villain that you don't get much explanation about in the film, but that kind of makes the character more foreboding. um, when it comes in, I mean, the character Doomsday kills him, but you get this little love story where Lois maybe knows for a couple days, because throughout the beginning of the film, Superman is dealing with, hey, do I tell her about this? Blah, blah, blah. And there's interaction with Flash, who's about to get married, the character of Flash that's about to get married. And Superman's asking, like, hey, does your fiance know about this? And Flash is like, well, yeah, of course she does, and so on. And all of that makes for some great moments. And that's something to bring up quick with this movie, is that very funny, like some genuinely hilarious moments. One of those being when they're talking about how Flash is going to get married, and the entire Justice League, because the Justice League plays a pretty big part in this. You have Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Cyborg, Green Lantern, Batman, Hawkman is there as well, and Flash and Superman, of course. And there's a point where they're all saying, they want to congratulate Flash, and they're like, "All right, everybody, let's go get beers." And and then Green Lantern looks at looks at Batman and says, "All right, I know you want milk. We'll get you milk." I thought that was beautiful. That was hilarious. And Green Lantern, boy, oh man, there's so much I want to say about this. The voice cast was tremendous. You had Nathan Fillion doing Green Lantern. You had let's see, geez. Oh, Lex Luthor was done by was his name Ryan Wilson, who is you might know him from. In Discovery, he played Harry Mudd, and he's done so many other things. Obviously, I'm not even hitting the big stuff that he's done in his career, that he's, a million memes get made out of him. But yeah, I mean, the voice cast was just tremendous for all of those characters. Again, Ryan Wilson did great with Lex Luthor. The interesting thing, so I'll talk a little bit about this. Okay, the storyline, you get the idea. Okay, there's a big battle. Justice League tries to stop Doomsday. Doomsday kind of appears out of nowhere. Just appears from this asteroid crashing, ends up killing some Atlanteans. So Aquaman knows about it. Blah blah blah. Everybody's fighting this guy. Justice League can't stop him. Superman has to come in and try and stop him. Superman can't stop him because Doomsday is like these bony outcroppings on Doomsday are so sharp. In fact, I remember reading this in the comic book in '92 and just being like, holy shit, like this is crazy. These things are so sharp that they can cut Superman. Like, can Superman bleed? Well, he does. And yeah, that crazy. And of course, it's what ends up killing Superman. I mean, he literally gets like stabbed, beaten to death and stabbed. It's really, and it's still a gut-wrenching moment. And there is the moment, if you're wondering, which is known from the classic cover that has been used on the graphic novels forever, where Superman's cape with the S on it is like, kind of hanging from a stick, and it looks like a flag, in remembrance of his death, blah, blah, blah. That's all there. Okay. Like a lot of those big beats are a big part of this, that were a major part of the comic book. But anyway, the voice cast in this is very interesting. So one of the more interesting things, I really like Aquaman. You got to understand, in the 90s, when Aquaman got redone, he became really, really cool. And it wasn't the Super Friends gay, which I don't care if he's gay anyway, if he was. But, like it wasn't the Super Friends and the thing that everybody makes fun of from back then, blah, 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 which, really comes out of homophobia. But even that was fine. I never had a problem with Aquaman wearing, the orange suit and the green tights and all this business. And in New 52, they did a big part with they brought a lot of that back, and he wasn't so much the bearded character that we got in the 90s that became such a badass. But Aquaman was voiced by Matt Lanter, Matt Lanter is probably best known, or definitely, I think, best known for being the voice of Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. And brilliant job. Like in fact, I could hear, Aquaman didn't have a huge part in this, but I'm hearing the voice. I'm like, man, I know that voice. And yet, turns out it's Matt Lanter. Nice. Superman, obviously the main character of this, was voiced by Jerry O'Connell, of all things, which is really, really interesting for a few different reasons. But to have him voiced by Jerry O'Connell, he did good. I thought Jerry O'Connell was fine. I don't think he had done Superman before this, but he delivered. And Jerry O'Connell, of course, best known for playing the part of Quinn Mallory in Sliders, certainly one of my favorite shows. And also, like I've been a fan of Jerry O'Connell for a long time, because a lot of people don't remember that actually around the time, I think this series would have been out when Death of Superman, the comic book series, originally came out, which would have been 92, 93. He did the show My Secret Identity. which is all about this teenage kid who had like these superpowers. It was a pretty bad. I mean, a fun for me growing up. I thought the show was fucking awesome. But I've been a fan of Jerry O'Connell for a very, very long time. Even though I know now he's more known for being goofy, or most people maybe remember him from like Joe's Apartment or The New Guy or something like that. Which whatever. Anyway, he'll always be Quinn Mallory to me, who I loved. Again, I really love Sliders as a show. But Jerry O'Connell does Superman, does a fine job. Now, the interesting thing is that, of course, Lois Lane. Now, who voices Lois Lane? None other than Rebecca Romijn. And just Rebecca Romijn, who used to be, of course, in the 90s, everybody remembers, back when she was playing Mystique in the X-Men movies. Rebecca Romijn Stamos, right? Because she was married to John Stamos. Well, she's not married to John Stamos anymore. She's married to Jerry O'Connell, which I had no idea about until just a couple days ago. Not because I saw this film, but it was a separate conversation. And so it was fascinating, just kind of the synergy that happened there, or the synchronicity that happened there, where suddenly, like, I find out this new information that Jerry O'Connell's been married to Rebecca Romijn for so many years, and somehow I had no idea that was happening. Of course, Rebecca Romijn's being talked about because now she's going to play Commander Una, number one, which was originally played by Michelle Barrett Roddenberry in The Cage. And she's going to be playing that character in Star Trek Discovery, which is badass in my mind. And fuck yes, bring her on. But anyway, Rebecca Romijn, like, it was just interesting to find out that, oh yeah, she's married to Jerry O'Connell. And then they are voicing Superman and Lois Lane. Like, what the hell? Just, well, if the couple that works together stays together, maybe, I don't know, something like that. But I thought that was really cool. Rosario Dawson, of course, doing Wonder Woman, does a fantastic job, as she has been. Jason O'Mara, who has at different points been playing the part of Batman, not as much fun as Bruce Greenwood. I really liked Bruce Greenwood's take on Batman in Gotham by Gaslight, but Jason O'Mara does a fantastic job, and I have no complaints, nothing bad to say here about what he did. So the voice cast is top notch, and some very surprising names, but surprising names that did a hell of a job. So again, no complaints whatsoever on the voice casting. The music. All right, I want to talk a little bit about the music. This is something I always bring up when I do any movie review, but especially these. So the music was Frederick Wideman, who has done other DC animated movies. Why don't they let these guys use the classic cues? Like, just fucking let them use John Williams', Superman score. I do not understand why they're not allowed to use that. The music throughout this was totally serviceable, but not terribly memorable. It worked, but there wasn't much else. It didn't deliver the emotion that was needed. In fact, the emotion, ironically, like, when Superman's really getting beaten to a pulp by Doomsday in this, right? Or even Wonder Woman. When Wonder Woman, and Wonder Woman gets a much grander, and Batman also get like bigger parts, or parts that they never even had in the original comic book, in this film, as far as like fighting Doomsday. And there's some great moments between Wonder Woman and Superman throughout this that I thought were beautiful, because of course it's kind of heavily leaning on the New 52 storyline. So in this, Wonder Woman and Superman actually had a relationship beforehand. Okay, before Clark and Lois were a thing, right? So anyway, the moments when the music's not there, when the music stops, actually gives you the emotion. And that's a unique move. I mean, I have to give some credit. I don't know whose idea exactly that was, but it was directed by Jake Castorina, which I think it might be, and Sam Liu. Sam Liu's not new to the animated universe, but Jake might be. But I thought that was a smart choice. I think that was really, really, really well done. To come up with that, like, they actually not have the music play to give you the emotion. Usually, you do the exact opposite thing. So clever choice in how to go with that. But I mean, again, it just wasn't an impressive score. Not like the work that was done for Justice League Dark and for some of the other DC animated universe movies, where the music was a complete standout. The music doesn't stand out at all in this, and it wasn't because I was dealing with weak speakers here. By no means. I had very, very high end headphones on, and if there was a great soundtrack to be heard, I would have heard it. And also, I had a very high quality copy of the film. So. Anyway, I thought that was interesting, but while speaking of the voice cast real quick, this is something else that, now I already told you that during the end, you want to watch the end credits. Okay. Now, part of the reason you want to watch it is you'll be surprised by who's doing the voices of all these people. Also, there's the end credit sequences. Again, there's like 3 or 4 of them, okay, that you're going to want to see. Now, the interesting thing is there's a point in the end credits where they tell you each character, Aquaman's created by John Byrne, this, Schuster or whatever, made Superman, blah, blah, blah. They go down all that, right, of everybody who created all these different people. An interesting thing is this is the first time, and I could be wrong about this, and I kind of want to go back to other DC animated movies and just watch the end credits during them, because I think this might be the first time that credit of the creation of Wonder Woman wasn't given to Charles Moulton. It was given to William Moulton Marston, who we've been doing his entire book, Emotions of Normal People, on Patreon all month long, okay? So I found that fascinating. This might be the first time that they were willing to attach that name, because when William Moulton Marston, who did genuinely create Wonder Woman, of course, based upon his lovers, his wife and their lover, their polyamorous lover, Elizabeth Marston and Olive Byrne. When his pen name for creating Wonder Woman was Charles Moulton, okay, and when the creator of Wonder Woman got put into the comic books Hall of Fame, he got put in as Charles Moulton, not William Moulton Marston. So I wonder this seems kind of not political as in electoral politics, but political as in shady deals or something, or not shady deals, but some kind of, I don't know, ideas going back and forth and some arguments going back and forth with the production team. I wonder if this is the first time that William Moulton Marston has gotten credit in a DC produced feature for being the creator of Wonder Woman, and it didn't go to Charles Moulton. I'm going to look into that. But I thought, when I saw that, I was like, whoa, holy shit, and talk about a little bit more synchronicity, amazing. Because we've been talking, and I've been on really quite a tear with the works of William Moulton Marston lately. But to like finally see his name on a DC produced, not just in Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman, one of the greatest movies made, but on a DC created feature, or medium, like, to see that, I thought that was fascinating. So that was quite a shock as well. So definitely pay attention. This is one where you really want to watch the credits. And like I said, they're setting up for the sequel to this, that being Reign of the Supermen. And it's probably going to be a trilogy. They'll probably do Return of Superman after Reign of the Supermen, which will come out in 2019. Then maybe 2020 they'll do Return of Superman. Which, hey, rock and roll. Or if they want to do both of them in 2019, fuck, by all means. I can't wait to see more of this. So within the movie itself, like I said, very funny moments. There's some classic lines, and there's some things that I never really thought about. I don't exactly recall if the lines themselves were in the comic book, but there's a point where in fact, I'm almost certain this wasn't there. There's a point where Wonder Woman and Superman are arguing about their names, because Wonder Woman keeps calling Superman as Superman. She keeps calling him Clark, and he's like, look, stop calling me that. And she's like, well, you call me Diana. And he says, yeah, but you want me to call you that. And she starts saying, well, what, you want me to call you Superman? It's like, I think your ego's getting in the way. And he says, no. He says, I like being called Superman. And she asks him why. Wonder Woman asks him, why do you like being called Superman? And he says, it's because it's the name she gave me. Meaning, of course, Lois Lane, which, historically, that's exactly what happened, is that she came up with the name, Lois came up with the name Superman. In the various canons, of course, DC has rewritten that canon a few times. But boy, I was like, oh, that's so sweet. That was like romantic even. Like, it was so heartfelt for him to say, why do I like being called Superman? Not because I think I'm better than you, but because it's the name that she gave me. Oh, I like that. Nice touch. Just a great one-liner that gave this film a lot of emotion and gave that relationship a lot of emotion, which, again, I really like the retconning that this movie did with that relationship, or Lois didn't know up until just a couple days or barely that. Maybe even just a few hours before, Superman has to take on Doomsday. Man. Anyway, that was really well done. There was another point where when Superman and Doomsday are really going toe to toe, and the fight sequence lasts probably a good 15 minutes between Superman and Doomsday themselves. Of course, between Doomsday and the Justice League, it's probably going more 20, 30. But the fight sequence was that well done, and a lot of it was panel for panel with what was in the comic book. It was that well done inside of 15 minutes that it easily held you for that length of time, which an animated fight can't always do that, right? Because like even Dragon Ball Z has to bullshit you with putting in sequences of eyebrows flickering or something, and wasting your time for 5 minutes. This was no waste of time. It was just, punch after punch after punch, literally and metaphorically. One of the nice moments is that, Lois is covering this whole fight from a helicopter with Jimmy. The helicopter starts to go down, and Superman goes up to, obviously rescue the helicopter, save Lois. And when he puts the helicopter down, and the whole sequence is very reminiscent from, of course, the 79 Superman movie, or 78 Superman movie, which is one of my favorite sequences, one of the most powerful sequences, I think, in cinematic history, where, after Lois is saved, she says, who are you? And he just says, a friend. And I mean, it's just what I just got goosebumps now just thinking about it. I love that sequence. But anyway, there's a point when in Superman the movie, not Death of Superman, but in Superman the movie, where when he's during that helicopter sequence, very reminiscent of what's happening in Death of Superman, where, he said, Superman says to Lois, says he's saving her, don't worry, I got you. And she says, well, you've got me, but who's got you? That line gets turned around in this, where Superman saves the helicopter and saves Lois in Death of Superman. But he has to, he's really beaten up at this point, right? Like he can't, because he's been fighting Doomsday for however long within the film. And so she runs up to him and says, don't worry, I've got you, because he's about to fall over after saving the helicopter. And he says to her, well, if you've got me, who's got you? And nice touch. I mean, just to flip that line around, I thought that was really, really slick, really cool, and kind of a women empowerment thing in a way, and like showing that Superman's real power comes from love, and perhaps his love for Lois, which is something that happens throughout this film a couple times, and throughout the fight scene itself, which I thought that was a very, very nice message, because I can certainly, appreciate that. So that was a nice shot. And then there's a point even where, and this was so well done, Doomsday really finally has Superman down. And it's like one more punch and it's over. And then all you see is this little rock, this little rock hit Doomsday on the face. And you're like, and Doomsday just stops and turns, because it's this, meaningless show of force, right? And there's Lois Lane. She threw the rock at him, and she has another one in her hand, and she's ready to toss it at him. I mean, like the amount of powerful moments in this movie cannot be understated. It was that was fantastic. That was so well done with that. In fact, even there's moments now. Wonder Woman gets a much more significant fight sequence in this, and so in New 52, Wonder Woman has like this like hair, not clip, not tie. I don't know what you call these things, because I don't have hair, but that you like a clip that you run hair through, or like a ring that you run hair through. And there's a point when she's fighting Doomsday where that hair thing breaks, and then her hair kind of comes down, and she looks much more like the Wonder Woman that we've known for at least through a lot of the 80s and the 90s and everything. And you just go, wow, when her hair comes down, shit gets serious, and she starts really, really going to town on Doomsday. I like that addition as well, for a much larger fight sequence, or an actual fight sequence between Doomsday and Wonder Woman, where she gets to show off her real power. And boy, does she. A very, very well done moment. And obviously Wonder Woman is the hottest ticket in DC right now. So to give her that moment, I thought was cool. But on the flip side of that, on the flip side of Wonder Woman's increased role, the fact that Batman is involved in this so much, and that Batman can't stop Doomsday, makes it a little unbelievable. Like it's a little crazy that Batman's there and he doesn't figure out how to put a stop to this. I either wouldn't have had Batman in it, or I would have significantly lessened his role, or just figured out some reason to not have him there. Because if I gave the movie one flaw, it's that Batman's there and he doesn't stop Doomsday. You'd think he'd know how to stop Doomsday, or he'd figure out something quick. I mean, he doesn't even, to make it worse, like he doesn't bring in the Batwing, he doesn't bring in the Batmobile, like he brings in no vehicles, no technology whatsoever. He just like throws some little explosives at Doomsday, and that's about it. And it's like, are you kidding? Don't even have the character there if you're not going to let him go all the way. You know, I thought that took me out of it. That was the one thing that took me out of it. And what's going to keep this, what was otherwise that and the music and the understated music, uh, is going to keep this from getting like the highest marks as far as DC animated movies go. Okay. But yeah, I thought that was weird. But putting in Wonder Woman and giving her a chance to shine, I thought was actually a brilliant move. But bringing Batman in was kind of bullshit. Hawkman got a nice moment. I thought that was cool. You got to really see, because this is something that would become a bigger deal in the '90s, where you find out that the Flash is really, his like connection to the Speed Force and everything, especially when you read like the Kingdom Come comic series and so on. Is this very powerful character. And you get a little hint of that. You get a little bit of that in this. I thought that was a nice touch. They did very well. Other than Batman, all of the characters were treated very respectfully. They're very, very tied into what you expect from those characters. Green Lantern was joculant, just as he should be, and so on, and a bit cocky. And I thought that was cool. So no issues there with how the characters were treated whatsoever. So this is actually going a lot longer, probably because I did a review of VR as much as I did a review of Death of Superman. But yeah, I'd give this, if it's an out of 10, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. And it could have been if they had some kind of bombastic music coming in. The music wasn't bad, it was just serviceable. Okay, if they gave the music some more bombast, it wasn't so undertoned. Again, credit to them not playing music at certain points. I thought that was a brilliant move. And if Batman was utilized better or not utilized at all, I'd probably give this a 10 out of 10. I thought it was that well done. Again, all the voice actors. Jerry O'Connell, not used to that kind of Superman, but I think he did all right. I think he delivered on that. I'm very excited to see what happens with Reign of the Supermen. I can't wait to see who they're going to get to do Con-El. Lots of other little hints of things going on throughout the movie, not just in the post-credit sequence, that I think are worth paying attention to. I'm looking forward to that. I'm intrigued how they're going to treat the Eradicator. A lot of these characters, I really can't wait to see what they're going to do with them and how this is going to, all work out going forward. So, but the overall way they treated the storyline, fantastic. The updates they did, other than Batman, fantastic. No problems there. This is a very well done film, and like I said, it's far better than any other comic. Honestly, other than other DC animated universe movies that have come out this year, like Batman Ninja and so on, which Batman Ninja's still taking the cake as far as best comic book movie of the year. I'd put this right up there with those. I mean, it's better than anything that had come out in theaters, like easily. Handily, it's better than any of that. It has more emotion. Granted, it has the advantage of being based upon literally, in my opinion, probably the most influential, biggest, as far as scope and reach, and one of the best, if not the best, comic book storyline of all time. So it has that advantage going for it. I cannot wait. I absolutely cannot wait for a genuine, if they did this right, Batman Nightfall, which is when, Batman kind of ends his career and then comes back, etc. And, has to deal with Bane. That was kind of in 3 parts too. Like DC, they were really making bank in the early to mid 90s. They were doing awesome. Of course, I mean, then they kind of counted on that amount of money. And in the late 90s, that sort of thing would fall. And then they do like Electric Superman and so on to try and, revitalize things, but whatever. Which Electric Superman became a thing directly out of the outcropping of this storyline, of the Death and Return of Superman storyline. I would love to see an Electric Superman treatment, red and blue, however they want to do it. I'd love to see an Electric Superman treatment done by the DC animated team. Peter Tomasi did the writing for this, which Peter Tomasi has done a lot of the writing for different DC animated movies and always does a rock solid job. I would love for him to do the treatment of an Electric Superman storyline. But anyway, Nightfall, the way that they've handled this, if they can keep pulling this off right, they're probably going to do Nightfall next, and I cannot wait for them to do a treatment of Nightfall for the DC animated universe. That is going to be the movie that's going to, if you haven't been convinced yet just how great the DC animated universe is, Nightfall will be the one that'll convince you. I pretty much guarantee it. And I really hope that they bring in Bruce Greenwood for that, but we'll see. You know, we don't know what exactly will happen with that. There is a great like audio play version of Batman Nightfall that I think the BBC did that you can listen to. I mean, that was super well done in the '90s. That's well worth, if you can find it on torrent sites or something, it's well worth getting your hands on and giving it a listen. But I can't wait for a DC Animated Universe version of that. Anyway, I can't believe this went almost an hour. But there's a lot to talk about here, a lot to get into as far as the overall, scope and scale of the story, what's going to be coming up in the future. Again, make sure you watch the end credits and check out the names. I mean, there's a nice little history lesson and some real surprises in that credit sequence. And yeah, just can't wait for more of this story, for the entire story to come to a conclusion. And I hope they go all the way, because I want to see where, honestly, even in Return of Superman, not just Reign of the Superman, but during the Return of the Superman storyline, where, Hank Henshaw destroys Coast City. And I want Nathan Fillion there doing the voice acting for Hal Jordan, and Hal Jordan flipping the fuck out when that happened, snapping. Hell, let's go all the way. Let's have Hal Jordan turn into Parallax. Let's do the whole 90s, because they're setting it up. I know it's kind of based on New 52. A lot of the DC Animated Universe, especially the Animated Universe proper, which, again, comprises this movie and 10 others, an 11-film canon right now. Let's do the whole thing. Let's go to Final Night. Let's go to Emerald Night. Let's do it all. Have Hal Jordan turn into the villain. Have him be Parallax, the whole thing. I think that'd be phenomenal. I would so be on board with that. So anyway, okay, that's it. That really is enough for this. Of course, more content to come out still throughout July, even though I know we're in the last few days of it. And of course, then August is here, and baby, you're going to get your hookup. So that's it for this episode. The review of Death of Superman just came out 2018. Definitely one of the best DC animated movies made, but they're all great, or most of them, 99% of them are fucking great. So not a surprise, I'm sure, to hear that, but I hope I gave you some interesting tidbits to think about within it. Anyway, that is it for this episode. Of course, your Q&A is coming out, relationship promise, all kinds of great stuff. I will see all of you on the other side.